I just was always a wild, loose kid in my neighborhood. I just always went for mine. I maintained myself. I knew how to hustle, and I definitely wasn't no punk.
These little running around like I wasn't brought up. I was brought up toting slammers. Like, so my belt had to be extra tight. You feel me? Like
the first game, my nigga Punch Jim was popping, homie. Capo, I still fuck you already know. I shout out to Melly and everybody. I still fuck with my in Harlem. It's all good.
The distinction between street respect and hip-hop fame has always been blurred. Raw Diggs made sure Jim Jones experienced that lesson firsthand one evening in New York. This was not an online story or a rumor. This was one of those incidents that permeated every neighborhood, barbershop, and nook where people discussed the city's true identities. Jim Jones was on cloud nine. Dipset was sexy. Balin was all over. He was strolling like a member of the Harlem aristocracy. However, they didn't bow to anyone on the streets of Brooklyn. R.A. Diggs entered the picture at that point. Before he even penned a lyric, the man's name was enough to inspire fear. Raw Diggs was more than simply a rapper back then. He was a street general by certification. His legend weighed heavily. Known to move like a boss long before the business ever recognized his name, the ex-con was well respected in the projects. Everyone hushed their voices when you brought up R.A. Diggs. He lived by a code, had warriors, and had ties. R.A. in particular paid attention as Jim Jones began to move around Brooklyn, talking slickly and exuding that Harlem spirit.
I'm from the era where we sold the drugs, we didn't use them per se. That was the quote-unquote.
I grew up at a time when we sold narcotics. They weren't really used by us. The quote was unquoted at that point. It all began at a Brooklyn club function. On a street night, some kind of industry meets, Jim Jones let everyone know that Dipset was inside the building by popping bottles, flashing jewels, and pulling up deep. He had the swagger, the shades, the superstar aura, and the full Harlem atmosphere. Yet something about that evening didn't feel quite right. People claimed that Jim's group got into a fight with some local men over seats or alcohol, and that these men just so happened to know Raw Diggs. Word got to Raw in a matter of minutes, and the atmosphere in the room changed when he arrived. You could feel it. According to witnesses, the music became softer. People began stepping aside. Raw Diggs, who didn't need to prove anything, entered quietly yet heavily. "You good, homie?" he inquired directly, glancing at Jim Jones. "Are you aware of your location?" The tone shifted at that point. Raw wasn't there for a Hollywood act. Despite Jim's best efforts to remain composed. "There are no cameras out here," he informed him. Respect is reciprocal. It was obvious to all that this was not a debate. One man was checking the other. Jim didn't protest, which is the crazy thing. He didn't swing. He didn't yell. R.A. Diggs turned and left as if nothing had happened after he simply nodded and attempted to settle the situation. The quiet that followed, however, was deafening. It was like witnessing a superstar learn that he's still just a man in another man's city, according to others.
You blood from this day on, when you see us throw it up, you be putting way more work in than half these bloods that be out here and things like that. So you the homie now. When you see us throw it up, that's just that.
You have to know who Raw Diggs was in order to truly comprehend why that moment struck so strongly. He wasn't some tough guy rapper. He was Ronald Heron. He was a native of Brooklyn's Gowanus houses, one of those neighborhoods where you either make money or are absorbed. Raz's reputation in the streets predated his musical career. He had established a reputation for respect and fear by the time he began rapping. Not just because of the lyrics, people paid attention when he spoke. When fame took over, New York had begun to lose that authentic, old-fashioned street structure, and he stood for it. Thus, it wasn't merely a personal matter when Jim Jones and R.A. Diggs met. It was a clash of cultures. You had Brooklyn discipline versus Harlem flair. Jim was noisy, colorful, self-assured. Raw Diggs had no smiles, was gritty, and was Brooklyn. And all that Harlem swagger meant absolutely nothing that night. According to the tale, Raw had no intention of inciting conflict. He was establishing a limit. Locals were reportedly treated disrespectfully by Jim's people, who threw money and behaved as though they owned the place. "This ain't your block. This is mine," Raw reminded him as she pulled up.
They allege that Heron is guilty of racketeering charges for running a drug-dealing operation in the Gowanus housing development where he grew up. They also claim he was involved in 3 murders and 3 attempted murders.
Because everyone who was present told the same story. The incident quickly spread. R.A. checked him coolly in front of everyone without shouting or threatening, and it became legendary because of that serenity. He could command attention without making noise. Jim's tone reportedly shifted after that. No more Harlem talk, no more boasting. He was aware of the time. The entire incident became street legend, despite the fact that no blows were exchanged. That was the night Brooklyn temporarily degraded Harlem. Afterward, rumors began to circulate. Raw Diggs put pressure on Jim. In Brooklyn, he gave in. He learned to respect the ground from R. Diggs. Exaggerated or not, the tale endured, and a narrative like that endures forever once it is linked to your name in New York. People nevertheless used R.A. Diggs' involvement in his federal prosecution and subsequent life sentence a few years later as evidence of his legitimacy. Even against celebrities, he stood on his own 2 feet, despite their claims that he was crazy. Roz encountered the day he told the industry that some celebrities simply don't transcend. Certain lines became part of his story.
Rod Diggs got 3 life sentences. You heard about this?
I actually seen it on, I think it was on your website yesterday, and I was like, and I feel bad.
That night served as a reality check for Jim Jones. Even Jim, who has always been self-assured and a hustler, couldn't dispute the damage that incident made to his reputation on the streets. Outside his zone, people began talking, but Harlem continued to rock with him heavy. Fans would remark, but what about R.A. Diggs? Whenever he would rap about being outside or sound rough in interviews, it turned into that one tale that people couldn't stop talking about. The absurd thing is that Jim never once openly addressed it. He never disputed it or verified it, and his silence spoke more than words could. Because you would expect a man like Jim to correct the record if it weren't true. Perhaps understanding that certain stories are better left untold, he chose to remain silent instead. However, some who know Jim behind the scenes claim that this event altered his movement. He began inviting fewer people to gatherings in Brooklyn after that night. He paid less attention to the street show and more attention to business. It seems as though Ra's check served as a wake-up call, reminding him that notoriety has its own set of repercussions. Rod Diggs, meanwhile, came to represent real New York spirit. He stood for the streets that never sought influence. People continued to remember him even after he was found guilty. He was mentioned in songs by rappers. Street guys shared tales of how dangerous it could get if you didn't come right, and how courteous he was when you did. He was unique because he struck a balance between respect and fear. It was the night Rod Diggs humbled Jim Jones that kept coming up in the interviews and documentaries about old New York. It displayed something genuine, not because it was meat. When ego leaves its neighborhood, it can be checked. It went beyond rumor for fans. It served as a reminder that you belong to the streets and you can't rent them. Years later, whenever Jim's name is mentioned in relation to street credibility, that one anecdote continues to circulate. Some claim it is overblown. Some claim to have witnessed it firsthand. However, the message remains constant. No matter how well known you become, there will always be someone quieter, more genuine, and willing to put you to the test if you lose your bearings. That night, when Rod Diggs reminded everyone that the streets don't bend for celebrity, ultimately became a part of New York hip-hop legend. It has nothing to do with violence. Ego wasn't the issue, it had to do with principle. Jim Jones was not forced to shame him by R.A. Diggs. To save the code, he took this action. Always put respect before reputation, and the younger generation needs to witness that. It wasn't a complete loss for Jim. It served as a lesson. He has since developed into a family guy, businessman, and even an inspiration. Perhaps that experience accelerated his maturation because the confrontational old Jim began to give way to the more mature, wiser, and calculated Jim of today. However, neither the supporters nor the streets ever forget. Every city has a similar tale, but this one just so happened to feature 2 well-known names that will be remembered for decades. The legacy of R.A. Diggs got convoluted. His music, which never really took off, is what some people remember him for. He moved with loyalty, courage, and a code, and some remember him as the last of a fading race. His name is still respected even when he is incarcerated, because you knew he stood for something genuine. Whether you feared him or loved him, the story's lesson is that respect cannot be purchased. But jewels, vehicles, fame, and followers can. That is acquired in situations where pride and power collide, in rooms where no one is filming. And Rod Diggs demonstrated just what that means that evening in Brooklyn. Thus, the day Rod Diggs made Jim Jones feel inferior wasn't merely a tale. It was a pivotal moment that demonstrated the distinction between foundation and fame. The lights may have been in Harlem, but the code was in Brooklyn, and the streets remembers who left with their respect intact when those two collided. Because you can't pretend to be real in this game, regardless of whether you're a boss, a rapper, or a boxer. R.A. Diggs didn't need to say much to demonstrate it that evening. That Brooklyn night turned into one of those tales that people would never stop talking about. Because Rod Diggs and Jim Jones weren't the only topics. It dealt with what occurs when a picture and reality collide. You see, a man who is famous may lose sight of his position, but you will always be reminded by the streets. Rod Diggs didn't require a viral moment, a camera, or a chain. His very presence was more powerful than any successful song. He didn't need to intimidate anyone, no need to create a commotion. He simply reminded a man that respect is more important than fame by looking him in the eyes. The younger generation doesn't understand that. Being the loudest person online isn't the point. Who can remain upright when the lights go out is the question. That night was humbling for Jim Jones. In your own lane, you can be wealthy, well-known, or even legendary. However, respect is the only coin that counts when you enter another man's world. He had to learn that lesson the hard way, and that moment became part of his story. whether he ever talks about it or not. Sometimes the only way to accept the truth without acknowledging it is to remain silent. Even though Rod Diggs is currently incarcerated, his reputation endures. His name continues to echo beyond borough boundaries. And people continue to talk about the way he held himself and how he never bowed to anyone. He embodied the kind of old New York spirit that is hard to find these days, when reputation was earned by deeds rather than followers, and words had meaning. One thing is certain, he stood on business. Even if you disagree with everything he did, the purpose of this story is not to exalt the streets. It's about keeping in mind the values that the game was founded on. Discipline, loyalty, and integrity, the kinds of values that distinguish the real from the false. Like R.A. Diggs, every rapper aspires to be regarded, but few are willing to pay the price. And for that reason, this tale is eternal. It goes beyond just the headline. It's a warning story.